Hey everybody, it's Zaraki, and today I'm going to talk about what I believe is going to be on the September ban list. Based on a lot of the videos that I've seen on YouTube, I've realized that a lot of people make their decisions very biased-like, because as you could tell, a lot of people love this game, and a lot of people have some strong loyalties towards certain decks, and they have a lot of hatred towards certain decks that they think are too powerful. So, of course, the majority of the time they want their cards for their deck to come back, or they want cards to be made for their deck to make them more playable, and then they want to see all of the other good decks that are thriving to be nerfed. So everything's, more balanced. But I want to make this ban list prediction to be kind of just so I could say that what I think Konami does based off their thought process of sets that are released and sets that are going to be released in the future, on what their decisions might be. So I just want to see how close I'm going to get. So I'm going to make a lot of these predictions based off of what they have done in the past and how we've seen like the ban list changed over the past few years. I'm sorry if this video is going to be a little bit long, but I'm going to try to touch base with a lot of cards, just not for this ban list, but as for the future, I have a reference point, so I could say that I've already seen the power levels of some of these cards and how ridiculous or how good that they are. So I could say in the future, like, hey, I already knew this was going to happen. And so if anybody questions me in the future, I'd be like, I told you. I knew it was going to happen. I told you that these cards were good, and it was going to be possible that they were going to be in consideration in the future. So to start off, I'm just gonna bring out the cards that are currently banned, and I'm just going to skim through them, and any notable card I'm going to just talk about. Got them. Got these guys. One of my favorite cards. Sangan could probably come back one day. Right now it's not its time, but it is a possibility. I hear a lot of talk about Sinister Sea Serpent coming back, but if we're being logical about it and we think about it really hard, I don't think it could ever come back. Substitute, I love. I really love this card. It makes Frog so good, but anybody who's played in the 2010 format, they definitely know how powerful this card really is, so sadly he can never come back. I also hear a lot about Tribe Infection Virus and how this can come back, but yet again, if we're being logical about it and we look at everything that exists in the game currently right now that isn't banned or touched in any way, it probably can never come back. Well, not right now at least. I also hear a lot of talk about Thousand Eyes Restrict coming back. But as we've seen the meta evolve these past couple years, you see Instant Fusion has progressively gotten better and better in certain decks, and now it's to the point where people are playing 2s and 3s in certain builds. With that card becoming so popular, and how good it is because it bypasses fusion requirements just to get anything out, this card can never come back as long as Instant Fusion is in the game. And that's all I really have to say about that. I also hear a lot of talk about Butterfly Dagger. I do a lot of playing, and I test a lot of different things, even with these types of cards, just to see where things exist and see why things are as powerful as they are and why they are as good as they are. I haven't found too many uses for this card. I definitely understand the concept that it's basically kind of like another Sinister Sea Serpent in a way. I don't see too many things that utilize it that great, but I do definitely see how it could potentially be a problem in the future. So I don't know about that card. In all honesty, it could come back maybe one day. It's supposed to be a future fusion, which can't come back. Mass Driver. I'm going to briefly touch base with this because I have another card that I'm going to show that's like Mass Driver. This card is arguably amongst the most powerful, one of the most powerful cards in the ban list currently. It enables OTKs and FTKs. Konami does not like those. They destroy anything that can cause an OTK or FTK too easily. This card does that. And I personally love decks that do FTKs because the best strategy in the game, and I don't care what anybody says, nobody can argue this, when you're playing the game and you're playing it competitively, you're playing to win. You don't care how unfair certain things are. You don't care that your opponent's going to get pissed that they didn't get a chance to play the game or do anything. That's what this card does. This card lets you win and doesn't let your opponent get to do anything. And if you're a competitive player, you don't care how you get to the results. You're trying to win. So that's what this card does. That's why I'm saying it is arguably one of the best cards in this list, which is going to be another thing for me to reference to you with some of these other cards that I have to show you. I also hear a lot of people talk about Pot of Greed coming back. Yet again, with OTKs and FTKs, if this card came back, cool. Everybody would probably play it in almost any build. But then, as soon as this card comes back, it's going to help other OTKs and FTKs exist in the game. And then people are going to start to bitch. And then people are going to be like, oh, well, it's not Pot of Greed's fault. Well, yeah, it's probably not Pot of Greed's fault. But I'm going to tell you right now, since it's in the game, it's not going to help the matter at all. So, this card also should probably stay right where it's at. Another FTK enabler. Royal Oppression also gets a lot of talk of it possibly coming back one day. I agree. I think it should probably come back to 1. It's always been a good card. I think when it used to exist at 3, I absolutely hated it because everybody was playing it at 3, and it just made it so nobody could play the game at all. It was very annoying. At 1, it's not too bad, but currently, I'm going to tell you it should stay banned. I'm going to explain to you why this card and another card need to be at where they're at. But we'll get to that later. And then out of everything that's currently on the ban list, I think Trap Dust Shoot is the only card that can come back. I think it's the most skillful card. I mean, like, obviously there's no skill of just, like, activating a card, but it does. It requires a lot of skill. A skilled player is going to play Trap Dust Shoot because a skilled player knows that seeing your opponent's hand, maybe not so much right now because a lot of cards make it so where you already know what they have in their hand and everything, but I'm going to say as the format goes on, things change, and this card is really good. Yet again, because we already know what everything is in somebody's hand, this card is probably a little bit less powerful. So I do see how this card could come back right now. I'm going to say out of anything that's on the ban list currently, if anything were to come off, even though I don't think anything is, this is probably going to be the card. And now moving on to the cards that could potentially get touched here in the September ban list. I'm going to start off with what I think could come back. Black Wings obviously have been a good deck throughout the years, and we've slowly seen them get neutered harder and harder with each format for whatever reason. Newer decks come out that completely destroy Black Wings, and now they're to the point where they're like a solid tier 2 deck in the right hands, and if not, then they're just basically tier 3. Um, the only cards that they really have that make a difference right now are Black Whirlwind and Gale, with arguably other cards, but they're not archetype cards, so we're not going to consider those. Whirlwind, I think, could come back just because yes, it does allow you to search and whatever card that you'd want to search in Blackwings is cool, but none of the other Blackwing cards are so powerful that they make this like too busted. Gale, on the other hand, does. Gale lets you have monsters attack, get over problems. It's a tuner, you can sync and make other plays with it. And plus, if anybody's played in a format when Gale was at 3, it got to the point where a lot of decks were playing Gale in every deck at 3. And that card is incredibly good. So between Gale and Whirlwind, I think Whirlwind is more worthy of having an opportunity to come back. Gale, on the other hand, should probably stay exactly where it's at. The next card is Summoner Monk. As we've seen Konami do in the past, it's usually a card will come off the ban list, it'll go to 1, it'll go to 2, and then it'll go to 3. Summoner Monk, as we've seen the format develop, it's found its play in certain decks, but more skilled players realize that it's not that great, and it's not 100% important after you've realized how the deck functions. So usually more skilled players cut it to about 1, and usually other players just find it necessary to just not have it in there at all. I mean, in other generic decks, Summoner Monk's good, so it's not really that entirely great, so it could come back to 3. I'm going to say right now that on this next ban list, Summoner Monk will definitely go back to 3 if I'm making guesses. I don't have a Mizuki, but I'm just using Vampire Lord as like the reason to why I feel like Mizuki can come back to 2. I'm going to say right now that I'm going to guess Mizuki will come back to 2, simply because there's some zombie cards, obviously we know, that are coming out in Shadow Spectre, and to help those decks, Mizuki does give them a little bit more of an edge. Alone, vampires and ghost tricks and things like that are not that good if you've played them. I mean, against certain things, they're not that good. Against other things, they can be alright. Don't get me wrong. But to help both of them have a little bit more of an edge, definitely Mizuki helps that. So I'm going to guess right now that Mizuki will come back to 2. And last is Reborn Tengu. I think it can come back to 3. Definitely with them pushing more synchros. Will it happen? Probably not. I'm going to say that it's not going to come back to 3. But I do see it having the opportunity to actually come back. It's a good card, but given as the game is turning more into like an Exceed-based game, Reborn Tengu's not as great. I mean, obviously it's a powerful card, but given the meta and how things are, with other things limited and banned, Tengu's not as powerful as some things, as we know. Next, I'm gonna touch base with some of the like archetype cards that people know, and as we all probably know, are going to get touched in some way, I feel. First off, we're gonna talk about Mermails and Elanians. Mermails and Elanians have been out for a year now, so they've had their time. They've been able to function with all their cards in existence. So since a year's passed, it's time for something to be touched. So I'm going to tell you right now, Mermails will be touched on this next list. Because if we think about it, if they touch everything else and everything gets like lowered on the tier, and they don't do anything to Mermail, people are going to fall back to it and realize, hey, it's a good deck, and it's obviously can pull off a lot of good moves. So this is definitely a deck that they're going to have to touch this next list, especially since it's been around for a while. So I'm going to guess right now that Mermail Abyss Megalo is going to go to 2, simply because it's a searcher. I mean, it's not that great, but it's very toolboxy in the different things that it can do. I don't think it's like super powerful given the next card that I'm going to talk about. So I'm going to guess Megalo's going to 2. And the only other card I think in the deck that really needs to be touched is Dragoons. With Dragoons going to 1, it gives a lot less versatility to Mermails. They can't search their most powerful cards to start off their like OTKs and everything. Plus, with just 1, it gives them more, makes them be more skillful because they have to think about what they're going to need at the time that's going to either help them win or help them win in the future. So Dragoons being the 1 is not that bad. The deck's still playable. Nothing else really needs to be touched, just because now they have less search options. So Dragoons to 1, and then I feel Mermail Lanians will probably be where they need to be. The next deck I'm going to talk about is Prophecies. I don't have any Prophecy cards because I really feel like this deck is going to be touched in some way, and it's not super my playstyle, even though it's arguably the best deck. But the one thing I want to talk about, and most of you should know, is that cards that get released that have just came out usually don't get touched. Now, Prophecies have been out for a while, definitely compared to Dragons, and they only really got Judgment that came out that's more new. So I'm going to just take a logical guess based off what Konami usually does. Since Judgment is pretty new, I'm going to assume they'll leave it at 3. Even though personally I would say that yes, the card needs to be banned or it needs to go to 1. I personally would like to see it get banned because I do not like Prophecies because they take so long to play that it's ridiculous. It slows down the game so hard, and if you've been to a YCS or Nationals or Regionals, you know that the time goes on all the time just because Prophecies exist and the match takes really long time. That with Dragon Rulers too, but more often with Prophecies. So for starters, I'm just going to guess that Judgment's probably not going to get touched because it's still kind of new. So in order to like make the deck not as powerful, we got to get rid of certain cards. I'm gonna say for starters, if Judgment exists, if we ban this card, it makes a difference because now they can't re-add the cards that they use with Fate. But now with this card banned, we also have to touch some other cards to like make it less powerful. The other one I would touch is I'd probably put power to 2 or 1. I mean, with searching, I'd say 1 is probably the more logical thing to do. Fate, on the other hand, I think that card definitely needs to go to 1. It is recyclable with Tower, and it's obviously all the cards are searchable as well. But Fate going to 1 or banned as well on top of Eternity lets the loops with Judgment Day not exist anymore, and then it just makes it just a search deck for certain cards that help them win the game. So I'm going to say Power and Fate are the only cards I feel in the deck will go to 1 or banned. Probably not banned. They won't really kill the deck right away. And the last 2 cards are for obviously Dragon Rulers, which everybody seems to hate. And we got Super Juve and Gold Sark. Out of the both of these, logically, Super Juve needs to go. This is the most powerful card that they currently have. It lets you make plays, and then for burning your hand, it lets you not be punished for burning your hand. And we already know, even if they burn their hand, they're still not getting punished, because they could still make plays. Gold Sark, on the other hand, it's a good card. It allows you to start a lot of your plays, but as you can see in a lot of builds recently, they've been dropping Gold Sark to like 2, some to 1, some not even playing it. A majority of the time for me as a player, I even side this card out. I'm certain that a lot of other players also do the same thing. Gold Sark and Super Juve are definitely the cards on the probably the only cards on the Dragons list that could get touched because they're the oldest cards and almost that whole deck is brand new, so nothing else on it is going to be touched, just given the fact that the tins are also coming out. I could see this going to 1. I could see this going to 1. I'd say logically, to keep it balanced, put this at 2, ban this, or put it at 1, whichever. If I'm going to make a guess right now, I'm going to say both of these to 1. The next cards I'm going to talk about are semi-limiting, limiting. I'm going to go with Space Typhoon. If you've played in previous formats, you realize that Space Typhoon has been at 1 for most of the time. There was a time where it was at 2 and other things, but this card is incredibly good. This card is almost always played at 3s in every deck because it's so good. It should probably just stay at 2. I would like to see it at 1 because I think this is one of the most skilled cards in the game. When I see people blind Space Typhooning, it like kind of blows my mind because a smarter player usually always holds onto their Space Typhoon because this card gets you out of the worst positions possible. Like if you're in a losing position, this card will help you like bring it back in the right person's hands. And a lot of people probably also know what it's like to feel when they have a good setup, they have that one card really slowing down your opponent, and then bam, Space Typhoon ruined all your plays. So this card, I'm going to guess right now, it's probably not going to get touched, but I'm saying in the future, it could possibly go back down to 2, possibly go back to how it used to be and be back at 1. Currently, it's probably not going to get touched though. Macrocosmos, another card that is incredibly good. As we know, certain decks function all around the graveyard. This card completely shuts down certain decks. It's an unfair advantage when you can't play a deck, but that's why people play it. That's why this card is so good, because it just shuts down certain things. It's not going to get touched. I'm just using this as to say that, one day it could be up for consideration, but one day this card could possibly go to 2, could possibly go to 1. But right now, it's definitely not. Just realize its power, though. Effect Veiler. Now, I've been talking about this in Thunder King Ryo for a long time. I would say all the time that Thunder King Ryo was such a good card and so splashable in every deck that it needed to go to 1 or 2 one day. And you know what? I called it. I knew it was going to happen. I knew Thunder King was going to get touched eventually because its versatility is too good. Splashable cards make the game completely different. It doesn't make you play archetypes. It makes you play a small engine with a certain archetype, throw in the most powerful cards to stun your opponent, and then that's it. So Thunder King went to 2. I like the card, don't get me wrong. I love it, and I don't see why it's I don't see why it wouldn't be completely impossible for it to come back, but listen, cards that are so splashable and are so good, Konami takes notice of those cards and they do things to them. That's why they were going to touch Ryo. Same with Veiler. Veiler is another one of those cards. It gets splashed in every deck. It is used for so many different things. This card one day could possibly get the same treatment as Ryo. It can go to 2. It's a 1-star tuner. It does so many things. It stops plays. It punishes people. It makes synchros way easier to do. I mean, let's think about it. This card, it's probably not going to get touched, but I'm saying in the future, it's going to get the same treatment as Ryo. The next ones we're covering are powerful cards that do exist in the game that I do possibly think could get harmed in the future. Pot of Duality. It's a really good card. It's splashable in a lot of decks. As we see in the beginning of all formats, that most decks resort to playing Pot of Duality to get their plays going, to find the things that they need to do to win. This card is good. It's not too powerful, but, splashable cards, like I said, are something that Konami takes notice to. I mean, that's why it went to 2 at first. When this card first came out, everybody was like, oh, it needs to go to 1, it needs to go to 1, and it didn't. But it's just like Solemn Warning, it's just like Solemn Judgment. It's good on that type of a level, and eventually it's going to happen. I'm not going to say it's going to happen now, but one day, Pot of Duality, we will see it go to 1. Not only that, but, I mean, being able to search for combo pieces or any type of card that needs you to win the game, that's what this card does. That's why I feel it's in consideration of one day possibly getting touched. Eradicator. Now, out of all the cards that I've talked about so far, I've just made considerations of what could happen in the future. But this card on this next ban list, I could see it going to 1. I could see it going to 1 because there's a lot of ways to Eradicator people nowadays. And the advantage that it produces is incredibly good. It completely eliminates traps. It completely eliminates spells. It lets you see your opponent's hand for almost a costless thing because how easy it is to put dark monsters with 2500 attack on board nowadays. This card's really good. It completely shuts down prophecies, and if it can shut down prophecies, obviously any other deck that plays spells or traps like Chain Burn, deep draw decks, this card stops them. It's powerful on the same level as Crush Card Virus. It could possibly get banned one day, but I'm going to say as of right now, for this next ban list, I'm going to say it's going to go to 1. Now, Vanity's Emptiness. On the same level as Royal Oppression. It's on the same level as Royal Oppression. I don't care what you say. A skilled player uses this just like they use Royal Oppression. This card, although easier to get around than Royal Oppression, needs to go to 1 one day. I don't think it's going to happen now, but you are going to regret not saying that this card needs to go to 1. And the same reason why Royal Oppression, I feel, probably can't come back is because if this card exists at 3, Royal Oppression cannot come back. Now, if this card was at 1, then I think Royal Oppression probably can come back at 1, depending on how the meta would be. But I'm going to say nothing's going to happen to this card on this ban list, but it's going to happen. I promise you it's going to happen because of this card right here, Safe Zone. For those of you who are smart and look into what comes out in the game and looks at what happens in the OCG, Safe Zone is busted. Another card that needs to go to 1. Or possibly banned one day, but I'm saying 1 is probably more reasonable. This card is probably also not going to be touched, but this is going to be on the same level as this of getting touched. And you should know why, because number 66, Key Beetle, Safe Zone that, you do not know how hard it is to get around a Safe Zone Beetle. And then the next turn, if you don't have a Space Typhoon or a way to stop set cards, if they don't already have this card, then they'll just set it, protect it, activate it, and then you're in a lock that you're probably never going to be able to get out of. You're going to have these 2 cards protected, you're going to have your Beetle protected, and then you can't special summon. Neither of you. And then you're just going to get run down by a Beetle for the rest of the turn. I'm going to reference back to these, though. Gishki Mind August. As most of you know, there's an FTK with this card. Most people know that if you've played the deck or played against the deck, that you need about 3 of them to pull off certain things. So putting it at 2 would be logical, but I'm going to say this card needs to go to 1, just like Ghost Kraken. And Ghost Kraken, I'm going to say right now on the ban list, I don't have one to show off, but Ghost Kraken is going to be banned. Because if you've played Gishkis or played against them, you realize with one Ghost Kraken with M7, you can still loop your opponent's hand away. Well, you can loop a majority of their hand away and leave your field with like massive advantage. With Mind August, I feel like if you leave Mind August in the game, people are going to find a way to get around playing only having 2 or 1 Mind August. I'm saying putting 1 is probably safe. It doesn't need to be banned, but putting it at 1 makes it so they can't make those plays. And I'm not saying that just to be biased, because I like playing Gishkis, and I've played the Gishki FTK deck. It's fun for a person playing it. Obviously, it's not fun for somebody who's playing against it. But, I mean, if they really wanted to stop what's going on, putting it at 1 would probably be the best choice. And then the last card I'm going to talk about in this section is Rescue Rabbit. I know it's seeing less and less play, but let's be honest now. We know that this card is good. We know the type of power that it has. It can come back. It can come back one day. Given certain cards being released, it could be busted again. And then everyone's going to be like, oh man, Rabbit's too busted. We all know that Rabbit's busted. We all know the plays that it can make. Like, oh no, you just got to stop those. But if we just get rid of this, for starters, it slows down those normal cards that make the super busted cards. This card is on the same level as Rescue Cat. Maybe not currently ban-worthy, but one day it's going to need to go to 1. And I personally think that on this next ban list, Rescue Rabbit will go to 1. The next cards that I want to talk about are some of the XYZs. The first one I'm going to talk about is Gustav Max. Gustav Max is really good. Most of you, if you've played enough, know that the Electrum OTK exists, where you just use Gustav Max to burn your opponent to death. Now, there's also other plays with them in Gishkis as well, where you can OTK your opponent through just attacking and then Gustav Maxing them a couple times. I'm just going to tell you right now, like Mass Driver and another card that I'm going to talk to you about here in the future, this card allows FTKs. FTKs. Everybody hates being FTK'd where they can't play cards. I personally love it. But you know what? As soon as somebody figures out how to make level 10s where they can just spam level 10s continuously in a turn, they're going to use Gustav Max, and then you're going to get FTK'd. And then people are going to be like, oh man, those cards need to be banned. No. This is the same thing as Mass Driver. If you ban this card, the FTKs won't exist. So, keep that in mind. And Gustav Max is powerful on that level. The other card is Gaga Cowboy. Oh yes, yet again. It's probably not going to get touched, but I'm just saying, in the future. Same with Cowboy. I would say that Cowboys should go to 1. But it's kind of like completely pointless because, you know, like most people who play any rank or decks that play rank 4s only play 1 anyways. But I'm just saying that this card maybe might one day go to 1. It probably should be banned because anybody who's played regionals or higher level events knows what it's like when they're playing against any deck that easily makes rank 4s, that you're no longer playing a game where you have 8,000 life. You're playing a game where you're playing with 72,000 life. And a smart, intelligent player keeps that in mind all the time. Because Cowboy is just one summon away without having an Availer or a way to stop him to just burn them, and then they lose. It's like a good player usually doesn't waste their resources, so they can just save as many cards to come back with the best possible comeback, with taking as much life with still living, but Cowboy eliminates being able to do that some of the times. It's probably never going to get touched, but I'm just saying that it is a card up for consideration in the future. The next card is Big Eye. Personally, I think that this card could possibly go to 1. This is the only other card in the Dragon Ruler deck that I think is going to get touched. The reason why I don't think it'll get banned is because I'm kind of guessing that in these tins, that Big Eye's going to be in the tins, going to get reprinted. So because of that, I'll probably put it at 1, and then everybody will get a chance to have a Big Eye and use a Big Eye and know what it's like, I guess. So I'm going to say this card's going to go 1 on the September list. The next card is Ophion. Now, the one thing I want to talk about is that Ophion makes a lot of decks not playable because this card shuts down a lot of decks. It shuts down a lot of other decks compared to Dragon Rulers and Prophecies. Maybe Prophecies a little bit more than Evil Sworn, but since this deck is easier to make, Evil Sworns can just straight up like just shut down so many other decks that like it makes them just not playable. But what should we do to Ophion? Should we put it at 2 or should we put it at 1? I'm going to tell you right now, Ophion, to be fair, I think it's going to go to 1. The reason being is because obviously they don't want to completely kill Evil Sworns yet because it hasn't even been around for a year here, even though it's been out for a while in the OCG. It could possibly get banned, but I'm going to say it's going to go to 1. It needs to be banned in the future simply because Evil Sworns will still be able to make Master Key Beetle. And Master Key Beetle is so much harder to get around. They play the exact same cards. The Evil Sworns already play these cards. And you think that it's hard to get around an Evil Sworn Ophion with a safe zone and then one of these face up? Cool. It's still easy to Space Typhoon this, get rid of this, and then, okay, maybe the Evil Sworn or the Ophion will stay on board. But what are you going to do when Ophion's gone and then the deck reverts to playing Master Key Beetle with these? Then what are you going to do? Tell me. Tell me what you're going to do. So, Ophion probably will go to 1, I would predict. Maybe 2, but I'm going to say 1. And,